this point know that my name is Melissa Brownfield. I am 26 years old. I was born and raised here in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. I moved away for a couple years and lived in State College whenever I was finishing up my education there. I have 2 bachelor's degrees, one in English literature and one in art. No, that does not mean I can spell everything, so I'm sorry if anything is misspelled. I have my spell checker over there with the phone. So, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a background of why I started this. The reason I went to Pastor Jim about this was last year, almost a year ago at this point, it'll be coming up on a year next month I think, I lost a friend to suicide, largely because of his PTSD from his job. And I realized that nobody talks about mental illness, especially here in Fayette County. It was talked about a little more in State College with the university, but really not so much there either. It was like select groups you could talk about it, but not like as a whole. So I wanted to bring to light some of the things that I now know that I wish I had better tools at the time when I thought Tom needed me the most. But I don't blame myself. I know that that's not something you can do. But I know that there are different things that we can do just as family and as loved ones just to reach out, because I'm one of those people who I shut out everybody. I started developing symptoms of depression when I was probably about 14 or 15 years old. I started seeing a counselor in high school at freshman year. Not many people know that. I somehow convinced the counselors not to talk to my parents about it, not to tell anybody about it. It was largely because I just couldn't focus in class, and I don't even know what the event lead-up was to get me into counseling, but I remember at one point in counseling I admitted to hurting myself. And that's whenever I somehow, with my immaculate wording, I convinced them not to tell my parents. I now know that you're at the age of, I think, 14, they don't have to tell your parents. There's the rules are, I learned that from you actually.
Yeah,
that
14.
At 14 you don't have to notify your parents because you are kind of old enough in some things, because you're not considered, especially if you're not considered to be in crisis at that moment. At that moment I was not in crisis, so they didn't do anything. I continued counseling basically the rest of the school year though. I couldn't explain why I felt what I felt when I was 14 and 15 years old. I just knew that I would wake up and I would just think to myself, why did I wake up today? I don't want to be awake, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here at all. And I would think to myself, I know that's not right, but I don't know who to talk to. And I never wanted to go to my family and friends and freak them out so bad and tell them things, because every time I did start to talk to like a friend about it, it was that like gasping moment of, oh God, what can we do, what can we do? You can stop reacting like that, because now I never want to tell you anything again. That would be step number 1. Step number 2 was, I just wanted someone to listen, so I ended up talking to people that I probably shouldn't have talked to at that young age. I started talking to people that were older than me. I started getting myself into trouble in that way. I kind of stopped self-harming myself, but then I would let other people harm me instead. So rather than, physically hurting myself, I would, get into these relationships with different guys that they mistreated me. They manipulated me, they, convinced me what I was to do, not to do, twisted up everything in my head for years. Like, normal relationships were not a thing for me. I didn't understand them. I didn't understand how normal relationships worked, because I didn't have experience with them, because I just let anybody do whatever they wanted. And that was something, again, like I kept to myself. I didn't tell many people. A couple of my friends knew, but even they didn't know what to do, to the point where I'd snap at them if they tried to do something. So I was aggressive with people because I was being rude and just outwardly telling them, like, Don't talk to me about it, don't bring it up, I don't want to talk about it, I'm sorry I told you. I should have never told you. And I remember like as I grew and got older, I just figured out ways of talking my way out of anything. I could talk my way out of any trouble I got into, out of any relationship problem I had. I figured out what each person was like. I was very good at reading people. And one person could tell you like, oh, she's super outgoing, oh my God, she's the most fun to be around. The other person says, no, she really doesn't talk much, I don't know, you know what I mean, she only listens. Or this person said I was really daring, another person would say, she doesn't do anything like that. Like I would figure out what people wanted me to be, and I would be that person for someone else. So for a long time, I really didn't know who I was. And so that's just kind of how I went through high school, and that's how I started college. And I slowly got a little bit better at, you know, managing my own symptoms. I didn't go to counseling anymore. That stopped freshman year. And I thought, you know what, I'm fine. I have issues, but I'm fine. So that's how I finished out high school. I started a steady relationship. I thought things were good. But then in that relationship, I started acting out more like I could talk to somebody else and not, you know, not feel bad about it, because I felt like that person wasn't giving me any attention. And I felt like, well, this doesn't make me feel good, so I'm going to go make myself feel good. And so I was back to that self-harming, self-sabotage all over again. And what people don't realize is when you have a mental illness, self-sabotage happens a lot and you don't even know. And you don't even realize that that's what you're doing. I would self-sabotage relationships, schoolwork. I'd put stuff off till the last minute. Now mind you, I got good grades. I never, you know, had a failing grade. I was always in like AP classes, advanced classes. In college, I took more classes every semester than anybody else. And I did great. But I was struggling the whole time because I would put stuff off to the very end. And I kept telling myself, why the heck are you like this? Why can't you do anything right? Why can't you just be like every other student? And I started getting into acting and doing different like activities like that whenever I was at Penn State Fayette, and I was like, man, this is great. This is everything I need to get out, because I could be anybody I wanted on stage. I didn't have to be Melissa anymore, I could be somebody else. And it was amazing. And then I moved to State College. And then I was back in that stuckness again. What's wrong with me? Why can't I fit in? Why doesn't anybody want to sit with me? Why doesn't anybody want to talk to me? Why can't I do this right? Why can't I just be like everybody else? To give you guys a little bit more background, because I see myself spiraling, I was diagnosed with bipolar depression and anxiety disorder in 2016. At that time, it was after an extreme mental breakdown. All of these years of buildup had finally come to a head, and I was dating somebody who also had a mental illness, and together we just fed those terrible thoughts and those terrible ideas, and finally I attempted suicide. And it was a terrible decision, and like literally 15 seconds after the attempt, I was somehow standing next to his mother's shed, sobbing my eyes out in the grass. I don't know how I got there. I don't know what happened. I completely blacked out, and there I was. After a couple minutes of him yelling and saying I was doing it for attention, he realized what was going on, broke down himself, and called my sister. The following morning, they took me to the hospital, just a local hospital, and told the hospital what had happened the night before, and they got the mental health professionals to come in. At that time, they thought that it was best that I go into a psychiatric hospital. I did not want to go, but I was told, if you don't go, we will have to 302 you, which means they will have to send me there against my will, which would then permanently go onto my record. I asked what that meant. It means a lot. It means that if I ever wanted to adopt children, that would come against me. If I ever wanted to join the military, not anything, but if I wanted to, that would go against me. Any little thing that you think it wouldn't matter for, it mattered for. And I kept telling myself, well, I don't want to go, but I don't want you guys to just send me there, but I don't want to sign off on it either. And after about an hour of me yelling at nurses and telling them that I just wanted to leave, telling my family I hated them, telling my boyfriend I hated him, I finally signed off on it, and I spent about a week at a psychiatric hospital in Center County. That week was the most terrifying week of my life because I did not know what to expect. What the hospital had explained was different than whenever I was actually there, and there was just a lot of miscommunication. And probably a lot of misunderstanding on my part, who was going through a complete mental breakdown, was not listening to what anybody really had to say, and I was finally to the point where whenever I got there, I was just shut down. I shut everybody out. And I remember one girl coming up to me and saying, if you don't participate, you're not going home. If you don't talk to these people, you're not going home. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'll talk my way out of this too. And that's what I kind of started to do. And I started to warm up to people, I started to make friends, I started to get along. And I started to talk to the counselor there, but she had so much on her plate, I just saw that she wasn't really paying attention to me. And I was like, you know what, I have to be here anyway, so I'll play along, I'll do whatever they say, and then I'll get the hell out of here, and I just want to be done. And I remember after about 2 or 3 days in the hospital, I was like, why am I still here? I'm fine, I'm doing everything they want me to do, I'm participating in group activities, I'm getting other people to participate in group activities. I haven't tried to hurt myself, I haven't done anything wrong, why can't I just go home? So then the doctors recommended that I be put on a prescription for my depression. Okay, let's try that. I was receptive to trying something because I knew I had a problem. I knew that there was something wrong with me because my whole life it was centered around me. I felt like maybe this medication will finally fix it. I understood you needed a couple weeks of medication being in your body, so I knew I wouldn't feel anything right away. I knew if I felt something right away, it probably meant that there was something wrong with the medication and I needed to go to a hospital. So they started me on a prescription antidepressant, and a couple days later I finally went home. And I remember the first thing I thought of when I was home was I wish everyone would stop looking at me. I wish everyone would stop asking how I am. I wish this phone would just shut off. Because all of you are asking me how I am, and is it okay, and how do I feel, why would I do that, oh my God. And I was just so tired, and I just wanted to sleep all day long. When you have bipolar depression, it means that you experience extremely high manic points where you think you can take on the world. You think that, you know what, I can get all 10 projects done today, I can clean the whole house, and I can still have energy, and I can survive off of 4 hours of sleep, and I will be fine. And then, after a couple of those days in a row for me, I crash. So the depressant side of my bipolar depression comes out, where I completely shut down. I can't focus, I can read. I always say, like, the example of when I'm at work and I'm having a bad day, I can read the same email 20 times. I have no idea what that person wants me to do. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it, and I just think to myself, I'm going to go do something else, because I don't know what to do with that. I can't focus on that right now. So I get up and I start moving. One of the things I learned in counseling was that physical activity helps me. So physically getting up from my desk, taking a walk just around the building, helps me focus. Helps me be able to read that email and say, oh, Joanne's wondering where that paper is. That's a good question, Joanne, because I don't know where that paper is. But I'm going to go look for it. And so, in 2016, when I finally got out of the hospital, they said, you're going to go to a counselor now. You are now mandated, like, the way they worded it was, you need to go to this counselor. We already have the appointment set up. This is where you go, and this is where you meet her. Okay, So I show up and I sit down, and this wonderful woman named Paula comes into the room and she says, "Hi Melissa, my name is Paula. I'm going to be your counselor and we're going to work through this." And I just looked at her and said, "Do I have to be here?" And she just kind of stopped and like looked around in our empty little room and said, "No, what are you asking me?" And I said, "Do I have to be here? I had to be in the hospital. I had to take medication. I had to come here. Do I have to stay here?" And she just got quiet, and she wrote something on her paper, and then she looked at me and said, "No, you may walk out that door at any time. You may walk away from me, you may walk away from this building, and you don't have to come back in. You can stay here if you want to get help." And I sat there, tears in my eyes because I was just so mad. And I finally just looked at her and I said, "Okay, I want to be here." The first few days of counseling was terrible because they had to figure out what worked for me. We tried a listening activity, terrible. They played this video, this song, like recording of some guy telling you like this story, and I was so distracted by the sound of his voice I didn't know what he was saying. So by the end of this stupid video, I just like looked at her and she goes, "Well, how did that feel?" I'm like, "I don't know what happened. What was that story about?" And she goes, "Okay, that didn't work." I was like, "Okay, is it supposed to work?" She said, "No, nothing ever is the same for anybody. I just have to figure out what works for you." I was like, "Well, that didn't." And I got mad and I left. And every day that I came into that counselor's office, they gave me this sheet of paper and said, "Fill this out." And it was your wellness check for the day. And I kept thinking of my brother when I was a kid. My brother is a type 1 diabetic. When he was a kid, he used to get those little surveys that they would give kids at hospitals and say, "Can you fill this out?" And one day, my brother gets this paper, and they're asking him all these questions, and probably 8-year-old Murch is just like going on and on, like looking at this. This is the dumbest thing he's ever filled out. And finally it said, "Have you ever had thoughts of killing yourself?" And his response was, "Not until just now." And I remember like getting that piece of paper and just chuckling to myself as I filled out these stupid questions. And then like some of them, I know that people have these issues, but I was reading these going, I'm not that bad. I'm totally fine. I could go home right now. Do you hear voices? No. I mean, I can hear voices, but not by myself. One of the other questions said, there was like, did you self-harm this week? Did you want to self-harm this week? Did you think about suicide this week? Did you attempt suicide this week? And they were so draining because I would think to myself, what if I fill this out and they send me back to the nut house? And like, no, it's fine, go ahead, you can laugh. Because I make the joke myself. If somebody's talking about something and they say like, "Man, are you crazy?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's diagnosed." And they don't know what to do with me, and I'm like, "I'm sorry, I cope with laughter." Sorry. And I constantly have to, like, I feel like I have to apologize. I don't have to apologize. I feel like I have to apologize. Because I can make a joke of my situation all the time. Someone will say like, "Man, they'll send you to the nut house for that." And I'm like, "No, it's a little more complicated than that. No, I've been there, it's fine." And they're like, "Oh." And then they just kind of look at you like, "Oh." And then they, find a little shuffle that they want to get out of the room with. Oops. And I'm pretty open about it. Like, I talk about my mental illness. I'm an advocate for mental illness because I want people to get help. Because after all those excruciating first couple of days in counseling, of her trying to figure out what system worked for me, does music therapy help for you? Like playing these soft, super soft music that just made me want to sleep, but then I woke up still angry. That doesn't work for me. No, I'm sorry. Finally, we just talked. Finally, she started getting to the root of the problem and realized, oh, this girl will actually talk to me. She'll tell me whatever is going on in her head. And I felt like I could tell her whatever was going on in my head because She didn't know anybody I knew. She didn't know Melissa Brownfield. She didn't know my mom, she didn't know my dad, she didn't know my sister, she didn't know my brother. She didn't know who I was dating. She never met these people, and I could tell them anything I wanted. And it didn't matter. Because when I walked out that door, I was patient number whatever, and for the first time ever, I was totally happy to be patient number whatever. Because when I walked out of the door, my problems and everything I told her didn't hurt her. The biggest problem I ever had telling my family or telling my friends something was I felt like I was a burden. I felt like my pain and telling you what I was going through was going to add to your pain. And I didn't know how to separate feelings myself, so when somebody else would tell me something that was going on in their life, it did hurt me. So I thought that everybody felt like that. And finally, when I started talking to this counselor, I was like, man, this is great. I'm just telling her everything, and then I'm walking out the door, and I'm going about my life, I'm going to work, I'm doing this. This is good. So finally, I eventually graduated from my counseling. I'm now answering things textbook. I am saying, yes, I have a crisis plan. Whenever I am in crisis, I reach out to this person, or this person. Something that makes me feel good is going out for a walk or doing physical activity. Those are my good coping skills. I no longer do my bad coping skills of hurting myself. I no longer do my bad coping skills of letting others hurt me. Instead, I realize that, okay, I need to go for a walk. I need to get out of this room. I need to go over here. And if I can't go somewhere, my counselor said, well, what do you do whenever you can't do physical activity? And I just kind of looked at her. I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? And it was crisis again. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't move. What? She's right. What if I'm somewhere that I can't get up? Or if I'm somewhere that I need to get away? And it's happened. There's been so many times where a crisis starts to come up and I start to feel that fire inside of me and I'm like, oh my God, I need to come up with something else. So, slide 2, just so I keep like that. These are some of the things that I do. I don't know if any of you can all read it. Listening to music helps me a lot. I didn't learn this until those counseling sessions in 2016. And then like as I look back in hindsight, it made total sense. I would zone out in music all of my teenage years. Turns out that was one of my positive coping skills, not one of my negative ones. So music always helped me. I actually love going to concerts. As somebody who gets like anxiety attacks in public places, I love concerts. Because I can't hear what you people are doing around me. I don't focus on that. I will stand right next to the speaker at a concert because I like the reverberation in my body. Because I can totally zone out. And it's awesome. And I just stand there and then I come home and I'm like, yeah, that was great! Can you hear me? No! But it was great. So one of my big problems is like sensory issues. The reason I like the reverberation in my body so much is I go into a sensory overload. If I hear too many sounds at once, my best friend will attest to this, I hate the sound of chewing. I hate it. I hate whenever I can hear someone eating or drinking something. It drives me insane. It fills me with a fire, and I want to hurt something. And it's typically whatever you're eating. Like, I just have such anger to whatever you have in your mouth. So that's when I bump back up to music. If I go out to eat with somebody, if I go to an event where there's food, chances are you will see these hanging around my neck. And once in a while, you'll just see me pop one of those earbuds in and click a button. Because I can't hear you guys, I need to block it out with something, or else I'm not going to be able to focus on the conversation. Other sensory things that I do to like, if I can't listen to music, so I'm in the middle of a meeting at work. Somebody has gum. Why Mike has gum? We don't know why Mike has gum, but he has it. And he's just chomping away over there. So I will actually like start feeling my shirt or something, like something with my hands that I can feel a different texture and focus on that. So if you see me like playing with my shirt, or you see me like fiddling with my hair, I'm not being flirty with you. I just really, really can't focus on something else until I feel and can focus on it. I have to distract myself so much from something else happening in the room that I do some really weird things. And I think people just don't understand me sometimes, because in the middle of a meeting at work, I'll start fiddling with something, and I think they think I'm not paying attention, and then I throw out 5 different points, and everyone kind of looks at me like, okay, well, whatever, she got points, so I guess we can't get mad at her. So I deal with like my sensory issues. That's how I kind of cope with that. If I can go for a walk, I go for a walk. Even if I'm at work, I think to myself, if I eat my lunch while I'm working, I can take a 30-minute walk for break. I'm going to do that. Ooh, maybe I can split it up into 2 15 minutes because I feel like this is going to be a bad day. Let's do that, 2 15 minutes, because it's going to be a bad day. Because this person's right here telling me this person's shouting at her desk, MF and something, I don't know, but I'm trying not to laugh because I can't help it. My boss is telling me, we have this project, and this is all due. And I'm just going, Okay, I'm going to take my break now, and I go outside. And I was telling everybody that was here at the beginning that I plant myself. Sometimes I'm just like a house plant. You have to put me outside. You have to let me get some sun, and I perk back up. And it's okay again. And I can come back inside, and for the next 3.5 hours, I can adult, and I can work through whatever the heck you guys give me. And then when I'm done, lately after work, I go for another walk because I'm just so stressed. And it's not because of anything anybody does or anything that happens at work. It's just part of my illness. In 2016, I realized that I can't take medication. I tried medication. The first medication, I started snapping at everyone. I yelled at my sister for putting my dishes away in my house. Yelled at her. Tears in her eyes, screamed at her. And then afterwards, I just thought to myself, she's helping you, why are you mad? And I thought to myself, what is going on? I feel angry all the time. Turns out I had one of the side effects of my medication. I went back to my lovely doctor and said, okay, we gotta switch something around, this isn't working anymore. He goes, okay, you stop taking it. I said, yes. He said, give it another week, we'll start trying something else after a week so that it's more out of your system. Perfect, let's do that. I come back in a week. We try another medication. The first question he asked me was, have you ever had an eating disorder? No. Okay, so you're okay, that should be fine then. Okay, I start taking this medication. Turns out, this medication causes weight gain. Eating disorder question now makes sense. Okay. I have hyperthyroidism. Weight gain is really bad for me because it throws all my numbers out of whack. When you have hyperthyroidism, one of your symptoms can be depression. We just went in a circle, dude. We can't do this either. So I gained about 20 or 30 pounds within a couple of months. Not good. My numbers for my thyroid were all kinds of out of whack. So I just told the doctor, listen, I'm done. I am not taking this medication anymore. I'm learning tricks through counseling. We're going to try that first. Once we get this weight thing and thyroid thing under control, maybe I will try something else. So medication didn't work for me. So I went back to these. In therapy, I also learned about breathing deeply. And it sounds super dumb whenever a counselor's sitting there and says, you should take a deep breath. That is the most irritating thing that anybody can tell you when you're irate. when someone's just like, you can try to take a deep breath now. Why? I don't want to take a deep breath. I want to be mad. I want to scream at you. But it does. It helps. So I have to constantly convince my inner self that, no, that's actually a good idea. And I hear Paula's voice in the background going, haha, I told you so. So I take a deep breath, and I completely fill my lungs, and I do that huge yoga breath that... So once in a while, it comes out that loud at work, and I get some looks. And my coworker, Renee, has been really positive and super uplifting, and she's starting to figure out these tricks of mine. So if she hears that, she knows, oh, it's one of those days. Hey, Melissa, do you want to do a coffee run for lunch? Yes. Get me out of this building. Okay, let's get in the car. Thank God, because I can't do it anymore. And then I come back all chipper with my coffee, and I sit back down at my desk, and everything's good again, because I could go away and walk away. If none of this works, I start to do extreme cases. I will shut my phone off. I will ignore every text. If I read something and it looks like there's a whole big body of text and I'm having a bad day, I'm going to look at that later. That looks intimidating. I'm not doing that. I don't know what that is and I can't do it. My phone will ring. I'm not going to do that either. If the phone keeps going off, I shut it off because I can't focus on it. There's too much going on. I can't do it. If at that point I'm around people and I can get away from people, I get away from people. I take a walk far away. I get as far away from humans as I can. And even if it's just outside my backyard and I'm just sitting outside with my guinea pig, because that makes me feel better. I put a guinea pig in the grass and we just sit there. And that's good for me because I don't want to deal with anybody. And it's nothing that anybody did. It's not that anybody is bothering me. It is a chemical imbalance in my brain. And that's where we're at. So I need to go outside to not look at anybody else and just figure my own center out and watch this cute guinea pig fill up on grass. That's what I want to do. If that still doesn't make me feel better, I go to sleep. And I know that sounds really weird, but my body needs a full reset. I need sleep. Sometimes I will go to bed an hour before I normally go to bed because I'm just so exhausted from being a functioning human being and going to work 40 hours a week, sometimes 60, depending on if I'm working my second job or not. I'm tired. I'm going to bed now. And I flop down on that bed, and I'm normally out in like 2 seconds because I'm just that exhausted. The worst part of having bipolar depression is even after doing these lovely tricks, the next day, I don't know if it's going to be a good day or a bad day. I might have like 10 really good days in a row. And on day number 9, the back of my head's going, it's going to be a really bad crash, isn't it? Oh yeah, it's going to be terrible. Let's watch it happen. And then for like 4 days, I'm this like zombie just going through work. This week was kind of one of those zombie weeks. I was just testy and moody all week. I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I know it's just me. I know this is just because I had really good days last week, and this is my really bad days to compensate. Here we are. And I started snapping at people at work, and I started snapping at some of my friends. And then I recently reconnected with a friend who deals with a lot of PTSD. And as I was talking to him one day, I snapped at him because he just kind of kept asking questions like, what's wrong? What can I do? What da 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 da. You can stop talking. That would be awesome. And finally, I had to walk away from him completely. I sat my phone down. I'm not gonna look at this. And then I thought to myself, I'm still so angry. What do I do? So I picked my phone back up. I texted another friend and I said, just talk to me for a couple seconds. I'm losing my mind. And this person said, have you tried what your tricks are? Have you tried breathing in, breathing out? Do you have music playing? Because they know me. They've watched me go through these episodes with them present. I said, oh my God, you're so smart. Oh my God, why didn't I think of that? Because sometimes I can't think of that. in those terrible moments, I'm just like, I just want to scream. I have this fire inside of me and I can't get it out. I feel so stressed. I feel like everything is against me. I feel like everybody hates me, nobody loves me. But somehow, that one little thing in my head said, why don't you text that person? They normally always have the answer. Thank God he had the answer. And he goes, did you try breathing? No. And I laid there. I hate you, it's right. Dang it, that helped. Fine. So, the next day, I explained to the first friend, hey, I'm really sorry I snapped at you. This is what bipolar depression is. It's not that it's an excuse to yell at you, but in that moment, you kind of said everything that I didn't want to hear. You kind of said everything that fed my mental illness. You said every wrong word, because instead of saying words like, hey, I'm here for you, it was, oh my God, I remember whenever this was happening to my sister, and you should try this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and then I'm like, okay, that worked for your sister. I'm not her. That you're not even talking about me at this point. And last week we talked about how it's really difficult to know what to say and what not to say. For me, I really hate when people check on me all the time. I hate the whole, how are you feeling today? Because you're not asking, how are you feeling today? You're asking me and looking at me and saying, how do you feel? Almost like you're walking on eggshells. And it's like, am I that miserable to be around that you have to ask like that? And I answer and I talk my way out of that and I just go through the day. But the questions that stop me are, how are you feeling today, Melissa? Have you experienced any episodes recently? Oh, you remembered, okay. All right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this because I feel like I can. If you just say, oh, how you been, da, 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 I'm going to give you the answer that everybody gives when you say, oh, how you been, how's your mom, how's your dad? Oh, everybody's fine. Okay, bye, I won't talk to you anymore. So that I say I'm on point because I'm falling off again. So I have learned what my negative coping skills were from back when I was a teenager. I know that hurting myself was not the answer. But I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know that all these beautiful things were actually things I could do actively and think about and physically stop doing whatever I was doing. And it only takes 10 seconds for some of these to work. Sometimes that's all I need, is just a couple of seconds to just be away and handle something on my own. I can come back in the room afterwards and be okay. I've been tested many times on my patients, especially in work situations. After 2016, my then boyfriend and I broke up at the end of that year. And I went through 2017 thinking, I am gonna die alone, I hate this is terrible, nobody likes me again. God, I hate being alone, I can't stand this. And I finally started working through how to be okay with myself. I was still in counseling at the beginning of that year, and I remember at the graduation of my counseling, I say graduation because that's kind of how she worded it. It wasn't like a ceremony, I swear. It was a cute little certificate that I got in the mail along with my, this is what your plan is if you ever go through crisis again. And it was really big print, and this is what you do with it. For the longest time, I carried that, crisis paper in my purse. I had it with me all the time because it was just that friendly reminder of, so if you panic, you can look at that. And it was just there for my comfort. In 2017, my grandfather passed away. And that was a huge deal for me. It was the first major event to happen since I had been hospitalized. I remember when he passed away, my phone blew up for about 24 hours. My grandmother on my other side of my family called me. My aunt on the other side of my family called me. Like 5 of my friends called me, and all of them were going, "How are you doing?" Not, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry for your loss. Is there anything, how are you doing?" That how are you doing of walking on eggshells because, oh my God, this might push her into another psychotic break. Do we need to come and get you in the hospital again? I'm fine. Yes, does this suck? Absolutely, it sucks. It hurts. It's terrible. Can you all stop asking me if I'm okay? And can we talk about, like, okay, when do I need to be at a funeral? When do I need to be home? How do I have to request days off from work. What kind of bereavement pay do I get? Because I'm broke as hell. I don't know what to do. So I finally got through that. Okay, we're going. My job is stressful because I worked at the time with students in college. I worked for an apartment complex that did student housing. I constantly had mothers calling me and screaming at me about something with their child's rent. And all I ever wanted to tell them was, your child is 21 years old. Why are you calling me? Your name is not on this lease. Why can't you just let them be an adult? And I would bite my tongue, and I'd say, I'm sorry, ma'am. Let me look up your son's account. Can I put you on hold for a second? And before they could really answer, I'd just put them on hold. And sometimes I'd get up from my desk, and I'd walk around my desk, and I'd sit back down, because I had the account in front of me the whole time. I knew exactly what student she was talking about. I knew why there was a fine on his apartment. It's because he got drunk and had a kegger, and there was puke all over the sidewalk, and we had to clean it up. Yeah, you got a fine. Okay. But I got through it. I would use my coping skills as best as I could in an office setting. Move-in weekends were always the worst because I had that parent no longer on the phone, but in front of me, standing right there. And I'd stand there, and I had a mom scream at me one time and tell me, if you were a mom, would you want your kid living here? I don't know, ma'am, I'm not a mom. So well, if you did, you'd be a terrible parent. And that day was especially hard to hear that because as somebody with the medical issues that I have, I was recently told, probably about 3 days before this episode, that if I ever want children, it may be difficult to impossible. So for her to tell me that I would be a terrible mother, I kind of lost my cool. And I shouted right back at her and I said, ma'am, I'm only a couple years older than your son. Do you treat everybody your son's age that way? Do you want me to treat your son that way? And she hated me instantly. It was not like a revelation to her, it was just anger. And she said, well, I want this taken care of. And my anger inside of me was like, well, you're not getting it taken care of. I had no power in the situation I was in. I was not allowed to make the decision she wanted. And I remember thinking, I just want to take a walk. I just want to be out of this building. I want to go away. I never want to come back. I just want to drive my car until it stops. Maybe I'll be in a whole other country by then. I don't care. I just want to be gone. And finally she left. And I let my boss know the following day that, hey, this lady's probably coming in. I'm really sorry. I definitely did not help the situation. Sorry. And I kind of backed out. Well, then after that day, that woman came back in, and when she finally left the building, my boss just screamed and shouted and said how much she hated her. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm normal. Somebody else hates her too. This is great, it's not just me. Woo! This was amazing. I felt like, oh my God, maybe this is how normal people do react. Maybe other people get mad. Oh my God, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I didn't need to be locked in a loony bin. Okay, maybe I did, but that's okay. Most of us have not been there, but I've been there. So I just kept thinking to myself, okay, I can do this. So after that day, I realized that maybe this job still isn't cut out for me. Maybe this still isn't what I want to do. And in 2018, I decided to move home. I had had enough of state college. I had enough of the bad memories. Everywhere I turned, I was just reminded of that hospital, of those traumatic experiences. And as much as I wanted to just power through it and get by, I realized that the best thing for my mental health is to not be here. Not be around the triggering things, not be around the people that were part of that experience, not be around the people that I ran to in bad decisions. I knew that I needed to go to a place that I felt okay again. So I found a job, I moved home. Shortly after that, my aunt passed away from cancer. And I knew as soon as it happened, as terrible and terrible as it is, I was so upset because I loved her so much. But I knew those phone calls were going to happen again. And I knew everyone was going to go, "How are you feeling?" I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Please leave me alone. Because I'm just getting to the point where I'm open enough to talk about my illness, where I can kind of look at people and go, "I'm fine. You don't have to fake it, because I'm not gonna." And I can talk to people now. I know who I can talk to openly. I know which friends I can go to and say, "This is my problem. This is all of it." And they'll go, "Wow, that sucks. How do you want to fix it?" And they'll, start to talk and bounce ideas off of me. And then I have other friends that I look at the giant problem and I take a piece and go, "This is my problem." And they go, "Oh my God, that's terrible." You see what it came off? Okay, yeah, it's terrible, thank you. And so I figured out who to talk to, when to talk to them, what's best for my mental health and what's best for their mental health. I can see whenever I'm affecting people, and it's not a negative thing for me anymore. It's not that I think that they can't handle my problems, but I see when they're having a day, they might not have a mental illness, but I can see when they're having a day and I'm like, my stuff can just wait till tomorrow, and it's fine. And I can only see that because I did things like counseling. I met people with mental illness. You would not believe how many people actually have a mental illness until you say, "Hi, I'm Melissa Brownfield, I have bipolar depression." And then like 4 other people in the room are like, "Friend." And they just kind of gravitate to you and they want to talk to you because they're like, "What do you do?" Because big secret about most of us with mental illness, we want to know what you do to cope because we're looking for ideas. And sadly, sometimes that leads some people into bad ideas, hence why I have my lovely list now. Because I try to encourage people to use these good things. My friend with PTSD is currently going through trying a new medication. Medication typically works for him. His medication dose changed, and he goes, "Oh my God, am I getting worse?" I'm like, "No, but you are getting older." Medications change over our lifetime. It is that way with any medication you take, whether it's high blood pressure or cholesterol or diabetes. Your numbers and the dosages that you take are never the same. And people with mental illness tend to forget that when a medication comes into our bodies, we start to change. We can get better, we can get worse. They can be helpful, they might not be. And they can change over our life. One day, I would like to try something again. I'm not quite there yet, because I still don't think that thyroid is quite under control. But when that day comes, I want to be able to try something because this super high manic and this super low depressant really sucks and it's really tiring. And every day I wake up and I just think to myself, okay, is it going to be a good day? Is it going to be a bad day? Let's put on some music just in case. Let's lay here for a minute. Let's read a news article on my phone. Let's text somebody that I want to tell good morning to start off somebody else's day good. Let me do something. Because if it's a bad day, at least I'll have that and say, well, at least the morning was okay. At least I did something proactive for myself. So, a lot of people, I'm kind of coming to the end of my rants here, people, I'm very sorry. A lot of people ask me, what could we have done to help you? What didn't I say? And I'm a very lucky person, and I'm not saying this just because they're in the room. I grew up with a really awesome family. I was super lucky. Like, my parents were awesome. They were super supportive. I was an art major, for God's sakes. I wasted thousands and thousands of dollars to go learn how to paint. And my parents were like, that's cool. And my dad helped me build those things. He helped me make those things. My mom was just like, why don't you try that color? Dang it, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. And I remember thinking, like, in college, how many kids told me, like, oh yeah, I'm an art major. Think how proud my parents are. I'm like, I don't know. Mine are. I don't. You mean your parents aren't? I'm so sorry. And so I got through. I had a really supportive family. I had family history. Like, people in my family have had depression, have had different issues. I learn about it more as I get older because the old way of thinking is you kind of don't talk about it. And as I get older, I get those trickles of information of like, oh yeah, that third cousin, he had some issues. What did anybody tell me that? No, that wouldn't have helped me back in time. It would not have helped me just to know all that. But it did make sense to me as an adult, like, oh, depression and anxiety can be genetic. Those things can run in the family. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they come out of completely nowhere, left field. You wonder if you were adopted. But sometimes it does make you feel better to know that somebody else in your family struggled, as terrible as that sounds, because you think, I'm not the black sheep. Or at least if I am, there's a herd of us. That's awesome. And I grew up and I had some pretty awesome friends too. I didn't have like a lot of friends. I was kind of a not normal child in school. A lot of kids just thought I was really strange. The jocks didn't really like me because I would say something and I'd yell at them. And Kirsten laughs because I would yell at them pretty openly. I would stand up for anybody else but myself. If somebody was getting picked on, I stood up. If somebody was being a complete obnoxious jerk, I stood up and I screamed. And when I yelled, people listened. And everyone would sit down on the bus, and I was like, and I'm just like irate. I feel this fire in me, and I'm like, bah, and I'd sit down, and I'm done. And the whole rest of the ride was crying. And I thought, okay, I can do this. I'm just angry all the time. It's fine. And so I had good friends, though, that would stick up for me. I didn't grow up in a bad way. My depression and my anxiety is nobody's fault. It is nobody's problem. But I felt so unable to go to those people I love because I love them so much. I felt that I don't want to burden them any more than they already are. I would think of the things going on in my mom's life, and my dad's, and my sister's, and my brother's, and I would think, man, I don't want to add to that. I'm fine, it's good, we're good, everything's fine. And inside I'm thinking to myself, I may or may not have considered driving off a cliff today, but I'm fine, we're good. And as far as what people could have said or done to help me, I think the biggest thing for me is I wish I would have had somebody stop and ask me, how are you doing today? what ways can we make it better? Rather than, oh, hey, how was your day? It's not that anybody did anything wrong, and that's not that they really knew. But sometimes you don't just want, hey, how was your day? Sometimes you want, how have you been doing? Are you using your coping skills? What ways can we improve them? Sometimes all we want is somebody to acknowledge that we have the illness. It's so difficult whenever somebody knows you have the illness and they dance around that topic. They don't want to talk about it. And when we're sitting here, we just think, can we just talk about it because it's this giant elephant in the room? Like this elephant's freaking tie-dyed and you don't want to talk about it? It's so frustrating. I mean, I can't speak for everybody with mental illness. I can tell you that when you have it, I know that many of us feel alone. We feel like nobody else in this world knows what we're going through. And just because I can get through something most days does not mean I can get through it all days. Just because my friend with PTSD can't handle yelling doesn't mean that I can't handle someone yelling at me. I can't, by the way. I cry instantly. I've been like that since I was a kid. The hardest part when people ask me, like, what could they do, is trying to explain that every day is different. For me, especially with bipolar. Sometimes I just want you to sit there on the couch with me and watch a movie. I think one of the most profound moments in my healing was actually something my brother did. I'm still in that terrible relationship with that person. Not because he was a terrible person, I constantly reiterate that, but because our mental illness is really bad for each other. Really bad. We had just gone into this huge fight. I don't know what it was about. I know that I was already having a bad mental health day. I was exhausted. This was post-hospitalization, so everybody was already like timid around me. Not my brother. Nope. He walked right into my room and he's like, you seem stressed. Yes, I do. I made tea. Would you like some? Yes, I would. And I came out of my room and we sat on the couch and I think we watched probably like 12 episodes of something. We just started binge watching something. And we sat there with our little cute tea glasses that we had, this stupid little tea set that we have. Don't know why we had it. I don't know why it was so cool to have. But we were drinking our tea like we were these little British children, and it was great. And I remember thinking, I like that he treats me normal. Somebody just asked me something that they would ask anybody. And it was just to go and watch TV. He didn't talk about it, but he knew that that would help me. He didn't say, how are you doing? He just said, I made tea. So from that point on, he had that habit. I would get super stressed, or I would come home from the worst day ever. I would come home from that mom yelling at me all day on the phone, and I'm just so upset. I'd go straight to my room, and I would just sit there for a while, and he'd pop his head in. I made tea. I need tea. Thank you. Come out there, and we'd sit, and at one time or another, sometimes I would talk to him about it, sometimes I told him what was going on, and he was always there to listen, and that was always the most helpful thing, was not that he asked me, how was your day, da-da-da. It was that I knew I could tell him. I knew I could walk up to him and say, I'm having a really bad day, can I just tell you what happened? And he never came up to me and said, okay, you need to do this, 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 and this is going to fix everything. He would just sit there and he would say, okay, what's next? He would make me think of the things that I could do for myself. What could I do to improve my situation? What could I do that would make the situation at work better? If there wasn't a solution, he would just say, do you want to watch another episode, or are we switching shows? No, hit play. I want to see what happens next. I thought you wanted to go to bed. Hit play. I want to know. And so, no, there was never a correct answer. Could somebody have done something more for me? That's not the situation. It's never that cut and dry. What you can do, though, is make yourself available to listen and actually listen. Like, if you have to listen over the phone and mute your phone so that every time you say something they don't hear it, great idea, because then they'll keep telling you more. They'll keep telling you what's actually happening in their day, what's happening in their relationships. Because the hardest thing to do is tell somebody how you're really feeling when you know they don't hear you. Because we just shut back off. I shut back off. I shut everybody out because I've determined you don't want to hear it. You don't want to know how my day was. You don't really care about how my day was. You want to know if I'm going to cause a scene again. And that sucks. So I won't tell you. But if you walk up to me and say, do you want some tea? I'm probably going to give you my life story. Because I just know that you're wanting to listen to me. You're wanting to be there for me. And I think that has been the ultimate gain to my knowledge and to my whole struggle of over 10 years of dealing with this. I finally found coping skills of my own. I have finally found things that work for me. And I have finally been able to recognize when I'm going into an issue of my own. I can see when things are building up. I can feel them, and I can now walk away. And it has taken 10 years. This is not an overnight thing, but it's finally there. And so I'm coming to my long close, and I hope that people are able to follow along with me, because I know that I'm bouncing around 600 places. The best part about listening to somebody to listen is that you're actually helping them. Even if they don't have much to say, even if their day just sucked. It just sucked because it sucked and because I'm having a bad mental health day. It's just bad. You can just sit there and drink tea with them, and that's totally fine. Okay, I think I'm done. So if any of you have questions, please shout them out.